Good afternoon. Welcome to the CEO talk, which is linked to the Global 50 Publishing Ranking, a ranking where we try to provide a panorama of the entire international publishing industry. We are describing, ranking, analyzing trends, developments by the example of the 50 largest publishing companies. And in a few, yes, you have a slide somewhere, which is coming up, hopefully. I see it, but yes, you see it. And there is a link where you can download that ranking, which is a digital book of 260 pages, which gives you a nice panorama of our industry. But when we started discussing what would be the appropriate topic for this year's CEO talk, we realized there is an increasing part of the industry that we don't portray in that ranking, because there are different models, different approaches. And we thought exploring these not so familiar landscapes, which are very dynamic, which are expanding very rapidly, might be the appropriate idea. And this is why we invited Ashley Gardner and Michael Tamblyn to be our guests, together with the editors of the 5 publishing trade magazines who are partnering for the Global 50 ranking, which are Publishers Weekly, BookDao in China, The Bookseller in Great Britain, Livre Hebdo in France, and Buchreport in Germany. When I try to think of how to introduce you, I mentioned the term of global a few times now. The starting point for us is exactly the opposite of global. It's very local. I've learned that your offices in Toronto are walking distance from each other. And so I guess you are living in that little village of Toronto. Ashley has worked with Kobo before she joined Wattpad, which now has been acquired by Webtoons. And at the same time, your parent companies are at the other side of the globe, more than 12 hours time difference, in Korea for Webtoon, and which acquired Wattpad a year ago. A huge company called Naver. And Rakuten is the largest online behemoth in Japan, which acquired Kobo a while ago. So we are spanning between 2 companies in Canada, which have parent companies in East Asia. And if you think for a second, something is missing. No US, no Europe is playing a role here. Yeah. So we realize in one very practical, everyday life example what that globalization is meaning. It brings totally new geographies, relationships, and also audiences into the picture, which normally we don't think so much about. And when I say audiences, new audiences, when I try to figure out what is particularly Webtoon bringing to the publishing business, and we will discuss this later, I'm a firm believer that is a very genuine part of the publishing industry. The best way for me to find out was to ask the 16-year-old daughter of good friends of mine, who is a very voracious reader of books, and of course follows a good dozen of Webtoon graphic novels, manga stories, and she's a big fan of K-pop, of Korea pop. So suddenly we have new mixes that revamp our industry, and that is what we want to talk about. We start, as every year, with the editors of the partnering magazines, and I invite Edna Vodka for Publishers Weekly to start our conversation, and we will walk through a wide range of very different questions and perspectives of our topic. Ed, please.
Sure. Hi. Thanks. So, you all can hear me?
Okay. No, you are not on the microphone. Is there some? Can we?
Again?
Yes, now
Okay.
you are live.
Thanks, everybody. So again, I'm Ed Nowatka from Publishers Weekly, and also I work with Publishers Weekly in Espanol, which is interesting because I mentioned to Ashley before this started that I was just in Mexico, and I was talking to a young woman who had an interesting tattoo, and I said, "What is that?" And she said, "It's my favorite webtoon," and it was running down her thigh. So it's the amount of popularity of this can't be understated, even in Mexico. And so my question is ebooks were supposed to revolutionize. Digital publishing was going to revolutionize publishing in a lot of ways. The word we heard about a decade ago in this very room was disruption. And a lot happened. There were things disrupted, but then things seemed to plateau at a certain point, and innovation seemed to stall, except with you guys. And one other company that isn't present in this room, to which you have both become major international competitors. We all know who that is. And I'm curious if you could outline for us who may not be familiar with each of your narratives, a little bit of the milestones that have gotten you to this point and this level of immense popularity. I mean, again, I'm sure both of you can refer to numbers and the number of markets you're in, but it's, for those who are not familiar with it, it's, in a word, impressive. And if you could just start there by giving us some context, maybe with Michael, and since I think Ashley started working for you, and then now I don't know who leads here.
And it's
beauty before age, age before beauty. Which one are we going to go with?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I mean, to look at Kobo is, to kind of be able to look at something through a number of different facets. We're an ebook retailer. We also empower and enable other retailers who want to sell digitally and want to sell ebooks. We are a designer and manufacturer of e-readers around the world. And then we do that both within, under the Rakuten Kobo brand. We also power Tolino here in Germany. So the technology that sits under and behind the Tolino Alliance kind of emanates from Kobo. At the same time, we have a publishing arm, Kobo Originals, and also a self-publishing arm, which is Kobo Writing Life. And I think as we go through our conversations today, we're going to be talking a lot about, especially that last one. And just to kind of give a sense of general scale, about a third of our revenue comes from Asia, a third from America's North and South, and a third from Europe. And if you look at the retailers who are really holding their own from a market share perspective in ebooks around the world, usually we're in there partnered with them. And so that's, call that about 25 markets where we're really dug in deep, but then we're selling ebooks around the world, about 155 countries a week.
Can I underline one word, partnering? Because
Yes.
I think that's really a very specific Kobo thing, which is not always a typical thing for the publishing industry.
It was absolutely vital to us, and is the reason that, if you look 10 years ago and saw all of the startups that converged into ebooks at that time, and then you look at the ones that are still standing today, the ones that are still here are ones who were able to tap into a source of really high value reading customers, the people who buy a book every week, who buy 2 books a week. And if you are, our friends in Seattle, you're taking your print customers, you're turning them to digital customers. If you are Apple, you're selling 1 billion phones and then kind of pouring those people over top of an app and seeing how many stick. And the same if you're Google. If you're us, you're partnering with booksellers who have those passionate readers already attached to them. And they're looking for ways to be able to put ebooks in their hands as well as print books, and we're able to help them do that.
Ashley, your trajectory?
Yeah, so Wattpad was started in 2006. I joined the company about a decade ago, and I do remember I was looking up the stat of what it was for my first Frankfurt, and we had just hit the milestone of 5 million monthly users back then, almost a decade ago. Today, Wattpad has 90 million monthly active users around the world. Last year, in 2021, we were purchased by Naver, who also owns Webtoon, and also has affiliations with Hybe and other digital projects and a robotics arm. So it's been a fantastic learning opportunity and big culture shift there. But being able to partner and learn from Webtoon, they also have just under 90 million monthly active users. So our combined audience and the way that we're able to work together under two different but complementary business models has been fantastic. I think where we really interact with the publishing industry is that we have a talented pool of writers around the world. We are a publishing company ourselves in North America. We have 4 imprints. One is launching this month. We also partner to create imprints with publishers around the world as well. And we license books in a one-off basis to in countries that we work in. Our app is available in 50 different languages. We have users in every country around the world. Yeah.
Are you a tech company or a content company?
We're an entertainment company. We're a global entertainment company that is fueled by fans. And I think something that that Ed mentioned, I think, about how what is the opportunity for ebooks. And a lot of the early ebooks have been quite skeuomorphic. It's bringing the text of what is in a physical book into digital devices. And I think one of the things that's been exciting about Wattpad is thinking beyond that, of what are the advantages that digital brings us that we can do in different ways, and bringing fans along for that as well. People today, and why we're so popular, I think, with young people, is that they're not just consuming content, it's a conversation, and they're able to participate in the building of that work week over week and chapter by chapter.
You said entertainment company. I remember it's 5-6 years ago when Wattpad rebranded itself from Wattpad, oh, that's fan fiction, into Wattpad Studio. I think that was a very important step, and you might want to illustrate that even more so as Webtoons is also Webtoon Studio.
Yeah, so we had seen many writers on Wattpad go on to reach publishing success and entertainment adaptations. Beth Riekels, who wrote The Kissing Booth that became the big Netflix movie. Anna Todd, that I know was hugely popular here in Germany and many other territories, was a massive bestseller for us. And those two projects kind of started out as experiments for us of, you know, we spent a lot of time bringing famous authors to Wattpad, and then as a switch in our strategy, we thought, what if we brought our top users out into the traditional book world as well? And that grew to be bigger than an experiment and became the main focus of my job at Wattpad Webtoon Studios. And then now that we've taken this on for Webtoon as well, it's looking at how we can do a lot of the same things for their writers. There's a massive webtoon right now called Lore Olympus that has also been a 2 times New York Times bestseller for its first 2 volumes. And it's amazing to see how the fans drive the excitement of this, from tattoos to cosplay to merch, and making it not just a book that they're buying, but it's a huge hit across, I think, every social media site right now of people talking about Lore Olympus.
Michael, when do you plan to launch Kobo Studio?
Studio may be a bit ambitious, but when you look across the different territories, Kobo definitely does look different depending on where you are. So in Japan, for example, 85% of what we sell is manga. And that's now pushing us into different content consumption models, chapter downloads, kind of freemium models as well. And so it's kind of neat to see how one platform just sort of turns a different face to each territory depending on what those readers want.
You mentioned already the question of territories. That moves us to the next section, and I call on Carlo Carreño, who is not Chinese, but speaking on behalf of BookDAO, which is our Chinese partner. But Carlo also has a background of founding publishing trade magazines, starting in Brazil. Carlo, please.
Is this on?
Yes.
I'd like to go back to the introduction that Rutger did about that feels like innovation publishing. We are talking about new business model and formats lately are always coming from the quotation marks peripheric areas of the globe and not from the main markets. So my first question is if you agree with this, and then is it easier, harder to do innovation, to create and things like that, not being in the main markets? What is your thought about it for both of you? Come on, Canadians, make a decision.
Yeah, I guess the question being like, is it harder to innovate? Or I think that we're always challenging ourselves to see what we could do differently, how we can continue to evolve and change. As a tech company, I think sometimes some of the difficulties is straddling publishing and tech is trying to almost make both meet in the middle. We spend a lot of time talking to our tech counterparts of trying to help them understand why we can't publish a book in a few weeks, because as much as we can work really hard to do that, the global paper shortages and everything else, and we can't make Barnes & Noble come along with us on that ride. But then on the other side, you know, talking to publishers about why do we always have to do things the way we've always done them, and pushing people to work with us in new ways that challenge what traditional publishing can be.
And I think from our perspective, we spend a lot of time, you know, our innovation comes from following the reader and watching really closely both what a reader wants and what the barriers are that keep them from being able to read more. So, you know, if you look at the kinds of things that, you know, that show up in our hardware, for example, you know, we added stylus and handwriting because that was the first thing that nonfiction readers said was holding them back from reading digitally. I can't write on the margins. I can't circle things and highlight. And sure enough, when we put that into devices, we see people, you know, instead of having like a 25-75 split of nonfiction fiction, nonfiction versus fiction, we see a 50-50 split of nonfiction and fiction. So we've just unlocked a chunk of the market to digital that had previously been holding back, just because we were able to let somebody do something that would kind of be a normal part of their reading life. And so we look for those opportunities where one little thing, one feature, one different interaction unlocks a chunk of market. One of the things that really helps us with that, though, is, in our case, both publishers who are really interested in new business models and trying to push, you know, what a reading business model can be, and also self-published and independent authors who are always the first ones through the door, who are ready to try out a new thing, try out a new model, try a different way of interacting with a customer in a way that a publisher might be more hesitant to do. And so that's, if you're kind of looking at like the engine for innovation on one side and the fuel on the other, those are often the two things that are working together.
Thanks. And Ashley, am I back here? Hello. Going back to you now, talking a little bit about innovation. It was just announced the new reading platform Yonder from Webtoon, from your group. And the business model is already interesting because you buy tokens to exchange for chapters, whatever. But I was really taken by surprise because that's a highly curated platform for books. So coming from Wattpad, which originally is the idea that everyone can publish and see what happens and crowd evaluation, now we'll go to a very curated thing. So could you comment a little bit on that? And can we say then that curation is not going to die?
Yeah. So Yonder is our new premium serialized fiction app that just launched last week, with more to come on that soon. I think one of the biggest differences is Wattpad is all user-generated content. Anyone can join, anyone can post, anyone can sign up. Yonder is a little bit of leaning into the Webtoon business model, where someone has an editor, someone's working with them on where it makes sense to create a cliffhanger, working on what those posts are week to week. There are lots of self-published authors and publishers coming to bring their content to that new platform, and I think it's a great complement to what's happening on Wattpad already.
Thanks. And going to a little bit of business models, Michael, I'd really like to talk about all-you-can-eat subscription, the elephant in the room.
Sure.
Why? Because Kobo is, I think I can say that, the most publisher-friendly store and platform.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And you guys you guys offer all-you-can-eat in Italy, Portugal, and Canada, for instance. And lately, you're seeing this model taking some big hits. So Storytel just launched in France without all-you-can-eat. BookBeat stopped offering that in Sweden. Spotify launched in the US with only a la carte. So what is your take on all-you-can-eat self-publishing? Is this a threat? Is it an opportunity? And do you still see a future in it?
So we've launched now, I think, in 7 markets with all-you-can-eat reading on the ebook side. Some of those have all-you-can-eat listening at the same time. All-you-can-read, all-you-can-listen. So here's what's really fascinating about all-you-can-read is that we sell books one at a time. If we were, and it's a good business to sell books one at a time. So we were watching really closely for that question of cannibalization. Would we, as we started to offer an all-you-could-read service, start to see that decline in revenue for ourselves, for our partners, when we roll that all-you-can-read service out? And here's the thing, it didn't happen. All-you-can-read became incremental revenue that sat on top of the selling single-copy business model. It attracted a different customer who'd previously not been, I think 2/3 of the customers that we acquired when we launched Kobo Plus for the first time in Netherlands had never bought an ebook before, after us having been in market for years. And so we thought, is this something that's unique to the Dutch market? It was the first place we did it, so then we launched in Canada, and then in France, and then in Italy, Portugal, Australia, New Zealand, and the model's the same. But what people are reading is very different than what they're buying when they're buying single copies. We see people going deep into the backlist. We see people going into mid-list books that really have no sales profile at all in a la carte sales. And we see a huge surge in demand for self-publishing. And part of that is because as soon as you go into an all-you-can-read service, you take away that kind of primary barrier of selection, which is, am I going to like this book or not? Am I going to risk €2 or €4 or €5 on this author that I've never heard of before? You just get to try it. And so that's both unlocked a lot of value for self-publishers, definitely for the publishers who put their lists in as well, and everybody's making more money than they were making before, which is fantastic.
Thank you. And as Rutger said, I'm asking questions here for BookDAO from China, so I need to include China, of course, in this conversation. Kobo today is part of a Japanese group. Wattpad is South Korean. So my question is, being more connected to Asia, bring China in your radar in a different way? And how important do you see the Chinese market? And being a little bit more provocative now, can you think about future of publishing, of global publishing, without taking into account the largest population in the world? So what's your thoughts about the Chinese market?
1, 2, 3. For us as a company that does have has deep roots in Asia, has a significant business in Japan, we started looking at that through entry into the traditional Chinese market. We have a team in Taiwan that has kind of gotten us into the traditional Chinese publishing side of the business. We've extended that into Hong Kong, now into Singapore. And so we're starting to kind of build our familiarity with, I'd say, kind of the periphery of the Chinese market in a way. As probably everyone in here knows, being a bookseller in China poses certain regulatory hurdles, which are both logistically daunting and and just difficult to navigate. So when we look at it right now, we're also looking at People's Republic of China as a source of potential content that we can sell around the world, because there is a diaspora of Chinese speakers who have moved into other countries, who are looking for connection to home. And so we'll start there. In the meantime, we manufacture devices in China, we manufacture devices in Taiwan, and so that keeps us pretty engaged with that market as well.
Yeah, I would build on what Michael said about the regulatory issues keep out some of the platforms from working in the same way. But we work as a publisher with China quite frequently. We've seen lots of webtoons acquired for publication, as well as some of our top Wattpad stories have been acquired there as well.
Now we want to dig a little bit deeper into the workings of what you're doing, and I hand over to Fabrice Piot, editor of Livre Hebdo in France. Please, Fabrice.
Good afternoon. Talking about your company's strategic approach, I would be first interested in what are now your top priorities, your key agenda between building platforms, building communities, going from digital publishing to studio, etc.
Yeah, I think right now our biggest priority is this integration with Webtoon is very new for us. We're about a year in. We're launching our imprint with Webtoon this month in North America, and that's been really exciting for us to get into that market in a new way. Our main priority is looking at the IP that's happening off of both platforms, and as a global entertainment company, making it as big as possible and looking at other adaptation avenues, whether it's merchandise, video games. We're regularly talking to publishers about turning top best-selling books into webtoons, and a lot of those have now become really popular that we're going back to them and saying, let's publish the webtoon in print and look at all of these other opportunities. So right now, that's our biggest focus.
And for us, we are first and foremost booksellers. We are both selling books ourselves, we are empowering others who have books at the core of their business, but from a purely strategic perspective, we are in a fight for time. We are fighting against every other ad-supported, algorithm weaponized platform that is trying to pull time from consumers. And we have to fight for that time for books, which means we have to be valuable, we have to be helpful, we have to put a book in someone's hand that they find compelling, because that's how we earn the next 6 hours of their day, and that's how we keep them from rolling over into 6 hours of Netflix or 8.5 hours of TikTok. Is just that ability to be useful in helping to make someone's reading life better. And everything that we're doing is about trying to take friction out of that, try to make that seem easy and natural and not technology focused, but reading focused. And if we do that well, then we earn the next kick at someone's time.
So Michael, you already started to answer to my second question, which is, in your fields, who you identify, in the fields you are operating in, who you identify as your main competitors, so as the main company with which you can cooperate also? I mean, can you quote the main actors on these fields?
I like to think of us as lucky because we only have 3 competitors. They just happen to be the largest e-commerce company in the world, the most profitable hardware maker in the world, and the most powerful ad and search engine in the world. So beyond that, it's clear sailing all the way. But the same thing that kind of makes that competitive landscape tricky is also where we found our differentiation. And that is in being the company that you can partner with, in being the company that you can form an alliance with, that isn't spending all of its time trying to figure out how to kill you, whether that's as a publisher or as a retailer. And so when we look at the competitive landscape, we're really looking at a couple of things. It's more like kind of the threat landscape. One is access to content. We're in a constant fight with other retailers just for availability of titles. You know, publishers have been very good about making books broadly available to all retailers. We are fighting constantly on kind of the edges of the self-publishing market with organizations that want to pull titles in exclusively, that want to kind of create walled gardens of content and build competitive moats around them that way. We certainly have seen that in the audiobook market, where the whole thing has kind of been broken up by different players, each with a pocket of exclusive content of their own, which is hard on consumers. The other thing that we watch really closely, to be honest, is publisher consolidation. Because as publishers get bigger, as publishers amalgamate, it's that many fewer decision makers who could decide to do an experiment, who could decide to try something new, and slightly more biased towards protecting a large, an increasingly valuable organization with a much lower tolerance for risk. So we have to watch that as well.
Ashley, can I double down on that competition question? Is for you as Wattpad, Webtoon part of your competition? And also more broadly speaking, what are your competitors?
Yeah, I don't think that we see each platform as competition because they are so complementary, and we do share a lot of audience and promote our users to go back and forth from one to the other. I do think I would echo what Michael said about other places that people are spending time online as being the main competition of the other places that people are spending their entertainment minutes or their money when they have to take out 6 different subscriptions to different entertainment services for all of the different content. We want to be the place that they're coming to see webtoons and Wattpad stories.
And finally, can you, both of you, reveal today in this Frankfurt Book Fair 1 or 2 new projects you are working on?
That one's a hard one to talk about, especially in this space. I'll go back to what I said earlier, though, about nonfiction. Nonfiction has kind of been the impossible nut to crack in ebooks for years. And if you look at the difference between what is sold in a print bookstore versus what's sold online versus what's sold digitally, the gap between physical book sales and digital is mostly tied up in 2 things. One is children's books, and the other is nonfiction. Children's books live in a gift economy that makes it really hard to flip to digital. People love to put children's books in children's hands, it turns out. But nonfiction should be something that people want to read digitally. And so as we dug into that, as we brought nonfiction readers in, as we watched what they did, as we put books in their hands and shot video of them, what they did was engage with books in a different way. They don't just read them, they use them, and they do things to them. They mark them up, they take notes on them, they highlight, they're kind of sticking stickies in it, they're remembering things. And that meant that we had to build a whole other layer of utility just to capture those sets of dynamics. So the hope there is to try and pull in some of that kind of 25-30% of the market that's sitting outside of what we sell today and bring it in. And it's just from following what readers want.
Ashley?
Yeah, we talked about Yonder already as a new project that's really exciting for Naver right now, and a new app in the serialized fiction space. I think something else that is a trend for me this week and something that I'm thinking a lot about is the translation market, particularly in English. I think for so many US publishers, they've always thought, that won't work in our market, or these huge German bestsellers that aren't translating, or that type of reader, the romance reader doesn't want to read this other type of content. And I think when we're seeing what's happening across every other entertainment platform, look at all of the huge cross-cultural hits that Netflix has had, and the reading experience, you're seeing even less friction. The experience of reading a translated work is the same. You don't have to worry about subtitles or dubbing in other languages. And I think that we'll start to see a much bigger translation market in the English markets that have been missing out on it for so long.
And I'd add on to that in 2 directions. One is how much we're now seeing self-published and independent authors started to move territory to territory and language to language in a way that they didn't before. And the other is, I think, kind of a pull that's now happening with publishers who haven't exercised rights that they may be holding on to. We're having a lot of conversations with Japanese publishers right now, sitting on manga titles that have never been translated into other markets, where we know, because we can see the rise of those sales happening in Europe, in North America. If we could just get the titles out, we know we could find a market to them. And it's a lot easier to do when you're both looking at how Japanese sales are manifesting and you're able to see how sales in North America and Europe are going at the same time.
Thank you.
Now, we know all the different tonalities that you serve, but the obvious next question must be, how big is that hidden sector, that different sector, publishing beyond publishers, in the first place? One indication is a number coming from Amazon. Amazon pays to Kindle Direct Publishing authors and to small presses using KDP around royalties of around $40 to $45 million per month. That makes $500 million just in royalties. Now you can do the math. If you pay $500 million in royalties to a constituency, it's significant. Thomas Wilking is the editor of Buchmesse in Germany, and they are doing a lot of economics in the
Buchmesse is
publishing.
known to ask many questions about numbers and figures. And Rüdiger started to point on the global 50 of the ranking of the publishing industry. Where do you see yourself in this ranking as a publisher?
In each of the markets that we are in as Kobo, self-publishing, aggregated through Kobo, is the first, second, or third largest publisher in that market for us. And so, like, just to put this kind of in a context that people will kind of get their heads around, 1 in 4 books that we sell in English is a self-published title. Essentially,
1 in 4, 25%.
1 in 4 is a self-published title, which means that effectively, for us, self-publishing is like having a whole other Penguin Random House sitting out in the market that no one sees. It's like the dark matter of publishing. And it's difficult to detect because you only see it if you're at the end point where you're selling, or if you're working with the authors who are passing through the platforms. And it's fascinating from a publisher decision-making perspective because it kind of distorts how publishers look at the ebook world. And the easiest way to understand that is, an American publisher will pull up the AAP ebook stats for the month and see ebooks flat to down for the month. And kind of in the back of their head will go, whew, okay, don't have to worry about that anymore. Ebooks fine the way they are. What they don't know is that they're losing share. It's not that ebooks are flat to down, it's that their ebooks are flat to down. And that self-published and independent published authors are taking time and sales and dollars away from traditional publishing. And it's happening market by market, territory by territory, day by day. And kind of know it's there, but kind of can't get their arms around the size of it or what it means for them from a publishing perspective. And what's interesting is they've made decisions that have helped that happen. And we can talk about that later if you want.
Ashley, same from your perspective?
Yeah, I think what's so exciting to me is the volume of content that's being produced. I think that people tend to assume that Gen Z doesn't read or that this is a problem. And they're the most literate generation that I think we've ever had when you look at how much they're reading and writing in text messages and social media sites every day. And the amount of content that's being produced on a platform like Wattpad, there are over 1 billion stories that have been written that is all has no ISBNs, is not trackable. And it's people that maybe never would have thought of themselves as authors or thought to write. And those are going to be the prize winners of the future or the self-publishers of the future. And the fact that they, posted a chapter and then someone said, I can't wait to read what's next, that interaction and that social media loop that a lot of young people get sucked into today on other platforms is happening on a site like Wattpad. When they know there's an audience and that someone is waiting to see what happens next, it's that motivates them to write the next chapter. It's that's creating, 16-year-olds that have written 1 million-word sagas on our platform. And I think that's just such an exciting volume of content that I don't see accounted for in the traditional book industry in the same way.
And how would you characterize your content? Traditional publishers have a program idea. Some have a mission. How would you describe the content you sell successfully?
I think to the extent that we have a mission, it's to put a global distribution platform in the hands of individual authors. And those individual authors, it turns out, are incredibly sensitive to what readers want to read and are able to find a trend or find a niche or find a particular area of interest that either isn't being broadly served or is being served by publishers, but readers want more, and are able to follow those. At the same time, they're also much more flexible in terms of how they sell, either in terms of how they price, how they promote, how they reach out and engage an audience, or the kinds of business models they jump into. And so just by opening the doors, just by kind of letting them in, we get to harness that energy. And that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think to talk a bit about the content and the type of content it is, one of my biggest learnings in my decade at Wattpad has been that we are not most people, and we being almost everyone that works in publishing. It's just culturally such a small niche of the global population and what people might want to read. And we need curation in a lot of ways. We need gatekeepers for certain types of books, but not for everything. And I'm constantly being surprised at what we see trending on platform when it might not be what I would pick, but I've also read things that I never would have picked that I've loved because I've seen how popular they've become and trying to understand what is so special about it. And I think that's so exciting to let readers choose what they want to read and to really listen to the fans of the content.
Yes, traditional publishers learn that the e-books they sell are different from the paper books. Genre and light entertainment is more read on as e-books. Do you have the same? Do you feel the same, or?
I think when you look at the ebook market, what you're really seeing is personal reading, reading for yourself in isolation. And it's so hard when you're looking at physical book sales. What you're really seeing is personal reading, gift reading, parent buying for children, kind of all stacked on top of each other. And when you pull some of that away, what you're really looking at is like, what do people actually read every day? And so, a lot of that is reading for entertainment, reading for escape, reading for romance, reading for adventure. It's also reading for literature. It's also reading for understanding and education. But it's this sort of subset of the total reading world that's, what do you just read for yourself when no one's watching?
Ashley?
Yeah, I don't know what else to say beyond that. I think you captured it perfectly. I think that,
Perhaps one detail. Michael said for children books, there's a hurdle because they are a gift economy. Mangas and everything that is visual doesn't really confront that hurdle. Is this an advantage? Is this something where you can reach audiences that others can't?
Yeah, I think that when we look at what's happening on Webtoon and Wattpad, both of them are digital platforms where you do create an account to read. So, we aren't serving the children's market in the same way, but we are serving, I believe the rules in most countries are that you have to be 12 to create a social media account. So, but children, or not even children, Gen Z wants to read in different ways than previous generations did. And that chasm between, culturally, they're the first generation to grow up completely with the internet throughout their whole lives. And even for younger authors writing content for teens, it doesn't reflect their lives in the same way. And that's a huge opportunity for platforms like Wattpad and Webtoon, where people can talk directly to their peers and share things as it's going on. The speed at which young people want to receive information or want to receive updates today is they don't want to wait for necessarily for a book. They'll buy the book at the end because they feel like they were part of it and they participated in it, but they want to see what happens next as soon as possible. One of our biggest comments on Wattpad is update soon, when's the next update? And that's hard to achieve in the same way with print publishing.
Now we could bring to light quite a few aspects into that publishing beyond publishers, which are, as you said, Michael, usually overlooked. But now, at least for the last round, we want to go back to the publishers, because there are a few traditional publishers, relevant, big, small, and we want to discuss their relationship to you. And I invite Philip Jones, the editor of the bookseller in London, to curate that part of the conversation.
Hi both. Just trying to work out how to phrase the question, so bear with me. So it seems to me that you're both, in a sense, growing businesses, growing platforms, growing audiences, slightly out of the purview of the big traditional publishers. Michael, you've already referenced that a little bit, but the same for Wattpad. And I wonder, from your perspective, why you think the bigger publishers have absenced themselves from that innovation space, which I think it's fair to say they have, when I look back at the conversations we were having 10 years ago to where we are now. So the big publishers are getting bigger, but they're getting bigger as traditional publishers still doing the same thing. They're not getting bigger by innovating. So I just wondered what your perspectives were on that and why they've kind of cornered themselves in that way.
I wouldn't say that they've cornered themselves. I think that we have seen so many publishers be adventurous and experimental with us particularly. We've seen many publishers encourage their writers to post content on Wattpad. I think 10 years ago, if I talked to a publisher about buying the rights to a book, but us keeping it up for free on the platform, everyone would have said, no way, that's not happening. And I think they're learning through the examples that there are so many other ways to engage in these audiences. Some of our best-selling books we've done around the world with other publishers. We have an imprint with Penguin Random House in Spain that has been fantastic for us both. I think for both publishers and for companies like Wattpad and Webtoon, it's about focus in a lot of ways as well, and what are the things that we can do that nobody else can, and to create a global company of apps and entertainment platforms. That's hard to do within the geographic bounds of so many other publishers. You have to be thinking globally, and you have to be working around the world to do that.
I think from our perspective, first of all, we love publishers and we work with them a lot. If 1 in 4 books is coming from self-publishing, 3 in 4 is coming from traditional publishing. So, needless to say, they're incredibly important. And that number also varies as you go market by market and country by country. Self-publishing is only 10% of the French market. It's like 5% of the Dutch market. Some of that is because in each market you have that publisher or collection of publishers who's really rolling up their sleeves in digital, who sees it as a strategic opportunity for growth, is willing to try different things, talk to agents, bring authors along to say there are some audiences here that you haven't been able to reach yet that you could through these particular channels. And so we have publishing partners who are all in on that. If you look at where we started with Kobo Plus in Netherlands, for example, I think almost 80% of the total Dutch catalog is available through the subscription service, with publishers being very deliberate about what they keep in and out to kind of manage front list sales versus what's going on inside the subscription. There are community publishers who decided, let's see what we can do here. And then there are publishers who are kind of like that friend who you call up on Friday night that you're trying to get to come out with you and say, come out, it's going to be a lot of fun. And they're on the couch, they're really comfortable, they've got the TV on, and just kind of are cozy in their space. And so they're the ones that we sometimes just have to kind of pull on to try to bring out into this interesting world we're spending all our time in.
And Michael, just to follow up to a point you made earlier about this kind of dark matter, this kind of like 1 in 4 world that we know is there, but no one knows really what it looks like or even how big it is. And I think it's the same for Wattpad in a sense. There's a huge amount of activity that is not tracked by certainly the traditional media. How do we solve that? Because it seems important that we do at some point understand the markets that we're in.
We kind of talk about it to anybody who will listen, and occasionally we'll get a publisher who says, "Can you come in and talk to us about this? Like, what's going on there? What do we see? Who's buying them? What are their price points at?" And that we're happy to talk about in aggregate. We actually want publishers to make good decisions. We find authors moving back and forth between traditional and self-published platforms as well. There are a lot of mid-list refugees who got rolled out of traditional publishing, who ended up in self-publishing. We have people who are discovered in self-publishing who move back to traditional publishing. So it's a very semi-permeable membrane between the two. And it's not like we're trying to keep it a secret. It is, however, a market with very few players in it, which makes the kind of data aggregation that we have, say, with Nielsen Bookscan and in the UK difficult, because it's really us, our friends in Seattle, and like a couple of other players, and that makes it hard to do those kind of real market statistic exercises that we might otherwise be able to do.
Yeah, I think that it's something that so many other entertainment industries are struggling with as well. When you look at how the music industry has tried to capture streaming and capture uses of songs in TikTok, which has completely changed what I hear on the radio all the time now. Every time I hear something, I'm like, oh, this is that TikTok meme song. And the book industry hasn't really tried to do that yet on many of their bestseller lists of how do you incorporate the spectrum of reading and self-publishing and works that might be on Wattpad, and how many reads equates to a sale, and looking at the type of balancing that's happening when people are talking about like box office numbers and how do we incorporate Netflix into that. I think there's a lot of different ways that could happen, and I'm excited to see more of that on a lot of those lists.
So my sense is that the way you talk about your customers, it feels different from the way publishers talk about their customers. Obviously, they see customers as booksellers, not the end user. So there's that. But you're obviously closer to your customers in a way because you see them interacting with you on a daily, hourly basis. So what are your customers saying to you about the way they consume content that we need to understand and hear, or and traditional publishing needs to hear?
We talk about our customers not as readers, but as fans. And I think that informs a lot of the way that we work with our creators. I would also say a lot of our customers, though, are those creators. We're very much a part of the creator economy, and our authors see themselves that way too. And a lot of our top authors didn't seek out to become authors. They sought out to be influencers and to become famous on the internet. And writing is the talent that has allowed them to do that. And I think that's so interesting to see how important that is to a lot of these young authors that are succeeding on Wattpad. They're also huge influencers on TikTok, on Instagram, you should see how huge the Instagram following of Webtoon creators is, because it is, again, such that visual platform. And I think that changes what they want out of those types of agreements as well. And that's something that publishers often have a hard time getting their head around, especially when you have a young creator that's like, sure, fine, make a book, but I don't want to have to work on it. I'm too busy writing my Webtoon to focus on this right now. And I think that's something that is so important for publishers to understand about these new creators coming up today.
We do look at our readers as readers, and that's mostly because they're people who have kind of put books and book-length content at the center of their lives. Like that's the customer that we wrap our arms around. But we really have three constituencies of customers. We have the people who are reading, we have the booksellers who we're partnering with, who we need to keep agile and competitive, and we have the authors and publishers who are bringing content in. And each one of those has a very different, slightly overlapping set of needs that we have to fulfill in order to kind of keep Kobo reaching out to new customers. If we focus on the readers themselves, they are, they're trying to stretch their reading dollar further. They're trying to find books that are affordable. They're trying to find new books either by the author that they love or that's like the author that they love. And every time we can put something in front of them that starts to match those criteria, we keep that user for longer. And it's funny for us. The hardest sale is getting someone to read an ebook for the first time. If we can get them to their third purchase, they stay forever, and they stay forever as long as we're putting good books in front of them.
We are coming to the end of the conversation. I would have time for a couple of quick questions from the audience. Is there anyone? I'm having a little bit of a hard time seeing. Please wave with your hand if you have something to add. Yes, please.
Can we expect some significant progress in the hardware of ebooks?
I think we're providing progress every year, personally. I'll go back to handwriting as one big jump. The next ones are probably going to be related to screens and how screen technology works, and I won't say much more than that. And then, we fight the same fights that everyone else in the hardware space does, of sizes and weights of batteries, costs of materials right now, supply chains and components, but we never stop pushing. And if you ask someone, we got asked this when we started doing e-readers 10 years ago. It's like, why are you selling a black and white technology in an age of smartphones and tablets? And the answer, it turns out, is that people love that focus. They love a reading environment where nothing's coming at them from the side, where they're not getting a social media alert, where their boss's email isn't bouncing off their screen. And they invest in that the same way that someone who loves music buys great headphones, or someone who loves sports buys a giant 4K TV. That's the person who reads 2 books a week is the person who buys an e-reader, and that's the person that we optimize for.
I ask that because my impression, looking at the Italian market of ebook in the last years, is that which is quite steady, not growing. It depends very much on how you push the hardware in the hands of people, Christmas after Christmas mostly.
Absolutely.
I have one more question, lady over there. Can you hand over the microphone? Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm a publisher from Iran, and I've been working in the UK for a while in Cambridge Assessment, Pearson, and unfortunately the community of publishers, media people like Amazon, Kobo, they're a bit blind about what is going on in publishing scene, and you don't provide basically your access. I don't know exactly about Kobo or but I know about Amazon. I know about Apple. All of these big names. Do you have any concern about it, or do you want to just close your eyes and not considering that area as a receiver of your products?
And so, sorry, could you say which area we're blind to?
Iran.
To Iran in particular. I think Iran falls into that category of difficult to operate in countries when it comes to book selling, but it's it's really a question of kind of time and maturity for us. So it's not like it's a market that we're saying no, we don't want to go into. It is, and I think this is something that we're working on in a number of markets through the Middle East, is getting digital supply chains ready, like getting ebooks created, getting files made so that we have things that we can sell. We get self-published material from Iranian authors today, and we provide tools that allow them to bring that in. So it's not like we've closed the doors to it. It's just it's a hard market to jump into and really embrace, but not for lack of trying.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Michael, thank you to all of you for the attention, and don't forget to download your copy of the Global 50 Publishing Ranking, and have a wonderful fair. Thank you very much.